your eyes. The world has held you in her arms. If you let her go, it seems as if you will just drift into the sea. But trust me, you must believe. Everywhere you turn and everybody's looking, judging, criticize, making statements, hesitating, printing stories falsified. Understand me when I tell you truth gets buried in the lies. Babe, you better open your eyes, 'cause everything will be alright. Everything will be alright in the end. I know it's hard to stay open, heart on your sleeve. You're terrified the world is gonna knock you to your knees, and it can, to the point you can't breathe. But now it's time to stand tall, create your lane, take pride in how far you've come, stop living in the pain, and realize with sun comes rain. Hold on just a little longer, know the times are getting hard. Every salty tear you burn, don't give up 'cause you've come too far. Hold your head up to the sky, don't trust in who they say you are. You gotta go with your heart, 'cause everything will be alright. Everything will be alright in the end. Come on, y'all. I want you to feel this. Raise your hands in the air. Hey, join on in. Everything will be, it's gonna will be alright. Everything will be, don't you wait, will be alright in the end. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright in the end.
Good evening. My name is Imara Kennedy, and I am the National Director for Community Engagement and Communications for AIDS Healthcare, the world's largest global nonprofit public health organization with a primary focus on addressing the global HIV/AIDS crisis and epidemic happening. I am also the chair of the Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition, powered by AHF, an initiative of AIDS Healthcare Foundation that strategically and impactfully works with Black communities across this country to address the disproportionate impact of HIV and AIDS happening to Black and brown boys and girls. On behalf of our over 6,000 employees across the globe, it is my indeed pleasure to welcome you to tonight's powerful presentation of All Boys Aren't Blue. I believe that this work, written by George Matthew Johnson, is one of the most prolific and impactful pieces of our time and will resonate for communities across this country and really across this globe for many years to come. We at AHF Through Black are so pleased to present tonight's dramatic presentation, and we want to offer a very special thank you to all of the artists who lended their time and their talent to be a part of this amazing project, and of course, to George Matthew Johnson for trusting us with this work, and to the amazing directorship of Nathan Hale Williams and iN-Hale Entertainment for once again bringing magic to life. We also want to thank all of our community partners and our media partners that have helped to elevate this message tonight all across this globe and to connect with so many of you all who are joining us this evening. We know that working together as one community, we can end the stigma and shame that permeates throughout our community and that has had a devastating impact on the lives of so many, no matter what your sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic bracket, or quality of life. So we thank you for joining us. We ask that you continue to engage with AHF and the Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition as we stay committed to the work of empowering Black and Brown folks across this country. Thank you again, and please enjoy All Boys Aren't Blue, a dramatic reading of this most impactful piece of work.
Hey everybody, it's your girl Jennifer Lewis. Yes. Now, as you know from my own fabulous memoir, The Mother of Black Hollywood, I've been doing what I can since the 80s to fight this virus. After all of these years and all the lives we've lost, it's time to come together. We got to come together as a community to end the stigma and end the disease. Y'all take it from Auntie. Community is our superpower. Now get on out of here and enjoy the show. Go ahead on. All right now.
Hello, my name is George M. Johnson, and I am the author of All Boys Aren't Blue. Black history has always included LGBTQ people. Whether it was the brilliance of the Harlem Renaissance, or the Black history that was the Stonewall riots, or the 40+ years that Black queer people have stood at the forefront of the HIV movement. Blackness is inherently queer. My story is another story in that history. The story of a young Black kid growing up in the little city of Plainfield, New Jersey, with a supporting and loving Black family. At the center of that family sat my grandmother, Nanny, a Southern Black woman who didn't take any mess. My Black queer story is one of tragedy, it is one of triumph, and it is one of the Black experience. I am Black, I am queer, and I am HIV positive. My story is told through this timely and important lens. Welcome to the world of All Boys Aren't Blue.
All right, Kay. Now, I know you just had the baby, and Gregory said the baby's name's gonna be George. Now, I ain't trying to run y'all household, but I'm not calling no baby George. So we're gonna sit here, and we're gonna go through this Bible and find a middle name for him, cause, I ain't calling him George. Let's just call the baby Matthew, y'all. Matthew's a good name.
I was 5 years old when my teeth got kicked out. It was my first trauma. But before I get into that, introductions. My name is Matthew Johnson. Well, realistically, my name is George Matthew Johnson, but at the age of 5, I didn't know that yet. I'm from a small city located in New Jersey called Plainfield, about 30 miles from the bright lights of Manhattan. It's a place I once hated, but grew to love as my true home. my only home. My family's been a part of the fabric of the city for more than 50 years. My brother and I grew up middle class, or what black folks were supposed to think was middle class, with Christmases full of gifts under the tree. My little brother and I never wanted for a thing. Family was first for us. My family provided the kind of upbringing and support system that anyone would want their children to have. Unfortunately, my life story is proof that no amount of money, love, or support can protect you from a society intent on killing you for your blackness. As I said, I was 5 years old when my teeth were kicked out. By that age, I already knew I was different, even though I didn't have the language to explain it or maturity to understand fully what different meant. At 5, I wasn't allowed to walk to my grandmother's house, who I affectionately call Nanny, from school by myself. So I walked home with my older cousins, Little Raul and Rasul. I usually walked holding hands with Little Raul while Rasul went ahead. Living so close to the school, I'm sure Nanny never imagined within those 10 minutes, her grandchild's life would be forever scarred. The memory's vivid. You can still smell the air from that day. Sunny, mild, spring-like weather. We were at the corner of Lansdowne and Marshall on the lawn of the corner house when we ran into a group of kids from the neighborhood that I didn't recognize. They had to be my cousins' ages, around 9 or 10 years old. The main kid was white. The other kids were black and white, if memory serves me correctly. My cousins knew who they were, I guessed, because they immediately began arguing. When I sit with this memory, there's no sound in the moment, but I can see it. There were 3 of us, and there were 6 of them. But really, it was 2 on 6, because what did a 5-year-old know about fighting? The arguing kept getting more intense, with my fear growing as the boys got closer in each other's faces. Before I knew it, the argument broke into a fight, and I, the invisible boy, somehow became the biggest target. As my cousin squared up with the 3 boys, 2 others grabbed me by the arms and held me on the ground. I screamed for help, as it was all I could do. The 3rd kid swung his leg and kicked me in the face. Then he pulled his leg back again and kicked even harder. My teeth shattered like glass hitting the concrete. In that moment, I felt nothing. It's as if it were all a dream. And then I felt the pain. I also felt an emotion I had never experienced before. Rage. I didn't fully understand that feeling at the time, had not yet had the pleasure of introducing myself to it. The tears that streamed down my face were no longer about pain. I was now crying tears of anger, tears of rage. Ah! That rage was enough to stop the boy from ever bringing a 3rd kick to my face. I somehow broke free, lunged forward, and bit his leg with the teeth that I had remaining. He screamed so loud as I bit through his jeans. And by this time, my cousins had handled the other 3 boys and saw what had happened to me. They ran toward us, which made my assaulters retreat, and they grabbed my book bag and they said, "Run to the house, Matt!" Sound is now back on in the memory. I can hear myself crying as I ran home. I got to my grandmother's house and I continued to cry. Bloodied mouth, busted lip, and baby teeth knocked out. "What happened?" yelled Nanny. "We got jumped," my cousins explained. Nanny went and got ice and wrapped it in a paper towel, and she told me to hold it to my face. It all gets a little fuzzy after that as I remember bits and pieces of what occurred. When my mother got there, she came and checked on me immediately. She sat in one of the dining room chairs and had me sit in her lap with her arms around me. think back on that day a lot. There were no counselors or therapy sessions to help me work through what had happened. Therapy is still a very much taboo subject in the Black community. You know, those who are seen as having issues with their mental health face a lot of stigma and discrimination because mental health is often conflated with mental illness. So rather than having their child be labeled as something hurtful, my parents did the best they could do with what they knew. We did what we always did as a family. We loved on each other even harder. But the next day became just that. The next day. What happened the day before was to be forgotten, or better yet, buried. Unfortunately, what I also forgot was how to smile. I immediately became self-conscious about smiling. It's something that I struggled to deal with even as an adult. Because my baby teeth had been kicked out, my adult teeth, almost buck teeth, grew in extremely early. Adult-sized teeth on a 7-year-old are extremely odd-looking. And it brought me a whole new type of attention I wasn't looking for. My lips became protection for the smile that was stolen. Picture after picture after picture, I refused to smile. What did I look like to others? A child who rarely smiled. Did they ever take it as a sign that I was dealing with a trauma I couldn't get past? Or did they just pass it off as a boys will be boys thing that I would eventually grow out of? To go years without smiling in pictures, rarely being questioned why, leaves me to ask the question, what other signs of trauma do we miss or ignore in Black children? Black boys are supposed to be rough and tough, to suck up the pain and not shed a tear. Being Black and queer brings on layers of issues. There can be both a fear of your own community and a fear of dealing with bullying from other children who don't respect your identity. When that kind of pressure builds within a young queer kid, the fear becomes constricting and can wrap you in layers each more difficult to peel away as you grow up. As an adult, I've gone through the unlearning to understand that my community's treatment of Black queer children is in fact a byproduct of a system of assimilation to whiteness and respectability that forces Black people to fit one mold in society. One where being a man means you must be straight and masculine. I didn't have the ability to separate my Blackness from my queerness. The loss of my smile was as much a denial of my Black joy as it was my queer joy. When I did smile, it was a coping mechanism. My smile was a mask that hid the pain of suppressing who I was. Trauma appears all throughout pop culture, often sung by the masses as a hot lyric, penned by the performer as a release of that pain. The trauma is shared by the community too. Songs become our battle cries and the trauma becomes the thing that bonds us together. When I hear Cardi B say she got a bag and fixed her teeth, it's more than a cute line in a dope song, and yes, Bodak Yellow was a bop. But she was responding to years of hate and flack she received for having crooked teeth. She is talking about the trauma she dealt with and what she was able to do to gain back agency over those moments and then use it in a way to make folks proud. Every time she talks about her teeth, she is allowing herself to work through the process of healing rather than be burdened by the weight of holding the trauma in. January 15th, 2015 would signal a change in my smile-related trauma. My mother had 2 brain aneurysms that day. As a 30-year-old, I knew I had to hold it together. I was her eldest, and I knew she would need me. I remember the doctor saying, "It's time to take her back to the prep room." My dad stood on one side of her bed and I stood on the other. He leaned in and gave her a kiss And she said, "I'm gonna be fine." I stood there, nervous, terrified. I finally gave her a kiss too. As I pulled away, she could see that I was choking up. In that moment, I felt like that 5-year-old boy sitting in my mother's lap after his teeth got kicked out. As a tear rolled from each of my eyes, she looked up at me and said, "Smile, Matt. Just smile." I gave her the biggest smile I ever had since the day I lost it. My mom survived her surgery, and I learned a valuable lesson about holding on to trauma. It is necessary that we do the work to unpack our shit. It's time that we let Black queer boys unpack their shit. Smile, Black boys. Smile.
Elbows off the table when you eat in my house. What's taking you so long to play a damn card? Scared money don't make no money, baby. Hey. What'd I tell you about staying out of grown folks' business?
Louise Kennedy Evans Elder was her full name. I always thought it was funny that my grandmother had 3 last names. And to the world, she was all of those things. But to me and the other grandkids, she was simply Nanny. She stood about 5'5", a little heavyset, as I've said, with brown skin. She was the baby of 13 kids and stood as the matriarch to our entire family, even though her siblings were still alive and older than her. But when Nanny wanted something done, it got done. Nanny was and still is the best cook I have ever known. I mean, she would do cool things like breakfast for dinner and root beer floats and homemade ice cream sandwiches, even though she had to make mine a little differently than the other grandkids. But being different was my norm, but she never wavered in making sure that I was properly accommodated. When me and the other grandkids would talk about who her favorite was, she would always respond to the battling the same. I love all my grandkids, but I love each of you differently because you each need different things. That different things part really spoke to my soul. It wasn't until I was older that I realized what that meant and how well she spread her love to all of us, even though she probably wasn't taking care of herself. Some of my cousins needed a place to call home as things were rough for their parents. And some of us just needed a stable environment to come home to every day after school as our parents worked long shifts. And then there were some grandkids that just needed tough love and strong roots. And then there was me. A little queer boy, still very unsure of who he was. So I just buried myself in my schoolwork and hid behind my books. You know, what I didn't have in friendships, I could always find in stories. You know, while the other kids were hanging with their respective cliques, I was in the library. I was doing homework or playing Jeopardy on Nintendo. See, then I entered the Gifted and Talented program in the 3rd grade, which separated the smarter kids from those with average grades. See, to Nanny, education was the key. See, her parents weren't educated, so they didn't push it on her. So in turn, she wasn't book educated. So she made sure we took it seriously. Knowing I was smart, my grandmother decided to make me her protege. See, Nanny wasn't just a caregiver and a cook. No. See, Nanny was a hustler. See, mainstream media tends to make the idea of hustling a bad thing. What many to us in the Black community know as hustling gets taught in college business programs as multiple streams of income. My grandmother ran a nursery out of the house where most of the neighborhood kids grew up in. She baked pies and did catering events across the state. She was a registered nurse and had a wealthy white client that lived in South Jersey that she would visit every 2 weeks. She did all the flea markets and the garage sales. Now, Nanny, she knew how to keep a check, money in the bank, and cash in the mattress for a rainy day. For years, my grandmother and I, we were a team. I became her sidekick and her business partner, diving into a number of little ventures. One of my favorite ventures was selling candy to every kid on the playground before and after school. See, I made a cool 100 slanging Pop Rocks on the yard. The operation lasted several months before the school caught wind of it. It wasn't illegal to sell the candy, but the parents complained that their kids kept coming up short on their lunch money every week. Slinging Pop Rocks was just one of my many hustles. It took me until the end of high school to really realize what she was doing with all the hustling stuff. See, it wasn't simply that she thought I was smart and should learn how to create income. It wasn't simply because she wanted me to be a caring person that gave back to the community. Yes, she wanted all of those things, but more importantly, Nanny didn't want me to be alone. I was becoming isolated around the age of 10, and she saw it. And as hard as I tried to suppress my queer identity and fit in, I just didn't. I mean, sure, I had friends, but not like how my cousin and brothers had friends. And like the natural-born caregiver she was, my grandmother frequently placed me before herself. Even if that meant she was carrying a young child everywhere with her, she wasn't gonna let me be alone. Nanny decided that she would be my circle. And we were in it together. Furthermore, she had been in it before with children like me and our family. Growing up, I had a transgender cousin named Hope, as well as lesbians and gays within the family. My grandmother watched Hope grow up and transition, and I think that helped her to understand what she was seeing in me. She had also seen the damage that happens when children who are different aren't nurtured and loved the same way other kids are. See, when Nanny says, I love each of you differently, she's not saying that I love you less. She's saying that I love you whole as you are. I often think about what it would be like if the world existed with a nanny in each family. You know, why was my Black queer experience one of unconditional love when several others have become the standard of hate and familial violence? How could one family get so right what the rest of the world had gotten so wrong? We should have been the rule, not the exception. Instead, the rule looks more like I'd rather have a dead child than a gay child. But in my home, I had a father who never once said anything about how effeminate I was. My mother, who always knew, put a system of family support in place for me since the age of 2. I had a home because Nanny ensured it. Charity starts at the home. It's one of her favorite sayings. And I know that there are hundreds of other nannies around the world who fight for little Black boys and girls and gender nonconforming people who are considered different. They notice the signs and they step in to make sure that those children know that they are loved unconditionally. But Nanny didn't just keep that wisdom for herself. She put that in her children, who in turn put that seed in us. They put that seed in me to now be a voice for every Black queer boy who didn't know that there was someone out there fighting for them every day. The way I grew up always knowing that I would have a friend in Nanny is the same way that I hope Black queer boys who may never meet me but will hear and see my words know that they will always have a friend in me. I recall a conversation Nanny and I had a little later in life, moments after I had officially come out to her when I was about 25, my fear was that my being gay would disappoint them, although they never gave me reason to think that the community that we lived in was a different world. One of stigma around HIV and shaming around gay sexuality. So I waited until I felt like it was the right time. And there I was, just crying on the phone, and she was just as still and steady as a rock. The final thing she said, though, is what will always stick with me.
Hey, man, now you know whoever you start dating got to come see me first. Because I'm going to have some questions. I love you, sweetie, and I always will.
Although that day has still not happened, it was a reminder that as different as we are as queer people, some things are simply universal, regardless of sex, gender, or whatever. Elevating a community viewed as below you to having the same equity and equality harms no one but the oppressor. Nanny won't win any GLAAD awards, or she won't have her picture hanging for Black History Month. She won't make any headlines for operating out of a place of love, but she saw me. She saw me, and I get a chance to tell everyone about her. And maybe, just maybe, a queer person's family members or peers will read those words, and enough of her spirit will rub off. I love you, Nanny.
Matthew? Oh, baby, you could never embarrass this family. You know I love you just the way you are. And you know this runs in our family. You ain't the first, and you won't be the last. Don't you ever feel like you can't be yourself in this family. You hear me? All right.
I was depressed at the start of second semester. I'd made friends, gotten a 3.1 my first semester. I was having fun, but deep down inside, I hated myself. I got up every day and I still wasn't the person I wanted to be. I wanted to have the friendships and the good grades and the parties, but as a gay person, not as this guy who was petrified of having sex out of fear that someone might find out. I was depressed without even knowing what depression was. By the end of the semester, I had failed 2 classes, passed 1, and gotten an incomplete in another. My GPA dropped below 3.0, and I lost my scholarship. That summer, I called my mom, and I told her that I wanted to come home. For good. I thought I knew what she was gonna say. What time do you need me to come get you? But she didn't. She talked to me about how I had to tough it out and figure this one out on my own. Then one day I was walking toward home and I could hear this loud commotion going on in the square, our common area, much like what folks may call a quad. As I walked toward the crowd, I realized there were 700 students circled around the newest initiates of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Inc. And the square went hysterical. People were cheering and screaming. I didn't know what I was watching exactly at the time, but I was mesmerized by it all. During this same semester, I befriended a guy named Lawrence, who was also in the same business program that I was in. Me and Lawrence got close as teammates on the Honda Campus All-Stars, which is basically like HBCU Jeopardy. Lawrence and I eventually became really great friends. I remember our friendship being interesting because he was from Detroit, deep-voiced, very masculine, yet my being gay never came up in conversation. He would be one of the only people I befriended who wasn't focused on getting an answer to that question. As we got closer to one another, I found out that he was a part of a fraternity on campus, Alpha Phi Alpha. I quickly became interested in what a fraternity could do for me. Masculinity, or better yet, my lack of it, was always at the forefront of my mind. Joining a fraternity seemed like a win-win situation. The fraternities were built on principles of masculinity. Lawrence's frat had aims, which were manly deeds, scholarships, and love for all mankind. Manly stuck out to me. It was in stark contrast to the femininity that the sororities presented. I decided I wanted to join Alpha Phi Alpha. I had great grades, was good looking, at least I thought so, and I would be a strong addition to the organization should I be chosen. As an opportunity to be in a leadership position, a part of a movement bigger than myself. I was also looking for brotherhood. The ability to bond with other guys in a platonic way. For me, a fraternity meant gaining the one thing I so longed to have. A masculine ideal attached to me. After I expressed my interest to Lawrence, I didn't hear much about it, so I just kind of let it rest. Then one night at the beginning of the next semester, I got a phone call from an unknown number at about 9:30. Hi, can I speak with George, please? A guy asked nervously. This is George? Well, my name is Charles, and I think I'm your line brother. But now I knew enough about fraternity life that I wasn't sure if it was real or a prank. My heart sank. I'd heard horror stories about pledging, and I wasn't no punk, but I also didn't want to be walking into a setup or an ambush. We talked on the phone for a few minutes, and he gave me an address where I was supposed to meet him. When we walked into the apartment, there were 10 other guys. Some that I knew and others I had never seen on campus before. That night, we all got to know each other. We all bonded really hard those 3 months we were online together. Back then, you could say that. Now you have to say membership intake process. So throughout the intake process, we were starting to become more than just friends. We were forming a brotherhood, like a family. I never had a clique growing up. Joining the brotherhood meant I had a connection to these guys for a lifetime. We were all growing together. Some of us were hyper-masculine, while others weren't so much, but for some reason it didn't matter. This was the environment I longed for, one where my effeminate nature didn't matter and folks could see me for the person I was. I'd found that in my line brothers. We were all practicing at my apartment one night for our probate when I had an older brother contact me and, of course, pull that same question I'd gotten my whole life. He was on speakerphone when he shouted, "I heard you were gay. We don't allow that faggot shit in our chapter." My first response was, "No, I'm not gay, big brother, and I understand." He hung up the phone. My line brothers stood there around me, quiet. I was mad. And when I'm mad, I do what I always do. I started to cry. My line brother, Gerald, was the first to walk over to me. He looked at me and pulled me in for a hug. I broke down crying even more. I'm so tired of being called that. The rest of my brothers finally came over and hugged me too. Tough it out, some of them said. We've come too far. And they were right. Some of my brothers were hugging themselves that night because they were suppressing their queerness too. Together, we became a much stronger unit. I learned that no matter what happened moving forward, these 8 men would always have my back. Finally, April 7th, 2006 arrived, The day was significant for many reasons. Our fraternity was founded in 1906. Our chapter was established by a founder of the frat in 1907, making us one of the oldest chapters in Black Greek history. I was 7 online. In our fraternity, 7 is the jewel number because we had 7 founders. We arrived on campus and there had to have been 1,000 people waiting for us in that square. We locked up under one another's shoulders, chins on one another's backs, masks on, and began marching toward that square. In front of us was the light of Alpha. Like literally the Alpha sign in lights. Everyone was hyping us up for the show. I felt more powerful than ever in this moment, even with the nerves and the sweating. Our dean yelled to lock up one more time, and out again we went. This time our blindfolds off, and it was our final march to the show. We got to the square, the crowd erupted, my dean yelled for us to unlock, and we did. I looked out in front of me, and there was my entire village, all yelling at the top of their lungs, "I see you, number 7! I felt seen. And not in terms of my sexuality, but in the sense that I was now at the top of a Black societal pyramid for once. I was no longer the kid being picked last. I was no longer being forced into something masculine as a way to protect myself. I was defining my own masculinity. I was the center of attention for a good reason. People were rooting for me. In that moment, it didn't matter if I was queer to the older brothers who questioned it throughout the process. It only mattered what they felt about me. I was tough enough, just like everyone else. Black Greek life in our community has symbolism. It's a sign of how tough you are, that you cross the burning sands and survive to tell it. They took off my mask and I popped out to address the campus. We are George Matthew Johnson. We are from Plainfield, New Jersey. We are a finance major with a 3.3 GPA. Our line is called Kalfani, which means king and ruler, because alphas have always run this yard and will continue to run this yard. That night, I proved to myself that manhood isn't a monolith. That there was a version of manhood, of manly, that looked like me. It would now be on me to become a reflection of Black queer people. I wanted to become someone that future Black queer people could look to and know that their masculinity could be defined on their own terms. I went into it all chasing masculinity. I came out realizing that there was nothing to chase. That the only thing left for me to do was be this person, and in my full truth. It was time for me to begin letting folk into my sexuality and my sexual space while being a member of Alpha Phi Alpha 2. It was time for me to define me.
I want this song to help shape the way America sees Black and brown boys. And I hope that when you listen to this, you understand where I'm coming from.
Too many times I had to apologize. Too many times I wish you got it, so I didn't have to wake up in the morning feeling like I'm never gonna be worshipped. Too many times I gave up my position. Too many times I gave you satisfaction, and now I regret it because I wasted my time and I'm not who you want. I gotta be true to who I am. I gotta be faithful to where I stand. I I can be true to whoever knows me and really loves me for who I am. I might lose some friends, unfortunately, but I'd rather be down for only me. Cause everybody tryna live a life that brings a little peace, yeah. Because all boys aren't blue, yeah. You see, some boys they cry, some boys gotta work hard and feel out how to stand and with a little pride. Some boys like boys and nothing else in the world feels true. Some boys are waiting for you to realize that all boys aren't blue, yeah. So many times I thought to myself what I would be with you and everybody else, and them just chosen me. I cry for help, how you not see it and say you love me? Is that what love is? Yeah. And living black and pink is testament to future me. Be an example of what's strongest so the world can see. And hear me saying, yeah, I love you, yeah, I adore you, I'm fighting for you. Gotta be true to who I am, I gotta be faithful to where I stand. I can be true to whoever knows me and really loves me for who I am. I might lose some friends, unfortunately, but I'd rather be down for only me. Cause everybody tryna live a life that brings a little peace, yeah. Because all boys aren't blue. Some boys they cry, some boys gotta work hard and feel out how to stand with a little pride. Some boys like boys, nothing else in the world feels true. For you to realize that all boys are blue, yeah. All boys aren't blue, all boys aren't blue. They aren't blue, they aren't blue, they aren't blue. Cause all boys aren't blue, yeah. Some boys they cry, some boys they work hard and feel how to understand. Some boys like boys and nothing else in the world feels true. Some boys are waiting for you to realize that all boys aren't blue. Some boys are blue, but all boys aren't blue. There's some boys like me, there's some boys like you. Some boys are blue, but all boys aren't blue. There's some boys like me, and some boys like you, yeah.
Hi, this is Michael Weinstein. I'm the president of AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and I'm inviting you to join the HF family and Black for saying stigma's gotta go. Let's work together to reduce HIV/AIDS stigma in the community. Working together, we are powerful.
Hi, I'm Doreen Warren.
And I'm Melissa Harris-Perry, and we're the co-hosts of System Check.
And Melissa and I are proud to join Black and AIDS Healthcare Foundation to say, stigma gotta go. Gotta go.
Gotta go.
Gotta go.
It's gotta go. Listen, we need to all work together to reduce HIV/AIDS stigma in our community.
Because community is our superpower.
Yes, it is.
Hi, I'm Dawn Lewis, and I'm joining BLACC and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce the stigma around HIV/AIDS in our community, because community is our superpower.
Hi, I'm Travis Winfrey, and I'm joining Black and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce the stigma of HIV and AIDS in our community.
Hey, I'm Jamal Sims, and I'm joining BLACC and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's join together, y'all. We gotta do something to reduce HIV/AIDS stigma in our community. Our community is our superpower. Thank you.
Hey, this is DeMarco Majors, and I'm so excited to be joining BLACC and AHF in Stigmas Gotta Go. So let's work together to reduce the stigma of HIV and AIDS in our community, because community is our superpower.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brandy Kenner-Bell, and I'm joining Black and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce HIV/AIDS stigma in our community because community is our superpower.
Hi, I'm Patrick Ian Polk, and I'm joining BLACC and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce HIV/AIDS stigma in our community. Community is our superpower.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jasmine Simmons, and I'm joining Black and AHF in saying the stigma gotta go. We won't end the HIV epidemic until we end the stigma. And together, we can do it because community is our superpower.
Hi, I'm Dr. Noelle Reed, and I'm joining Black and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce HIV/AIDS stigma in our community. Community is our superpower.
Hi, this is Rodney Chester, and I'm joining Black and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce HIV and AIDS stigma in our community. Community is our superpower.
Hey, this is Jared Hill, and I'm teaming up with Black and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce HIV and AIDS stigma in our community. Community is our superpower.
Hi, this is Malik Brown, Atlanta's Director of LGBTQ Affairs, and I'm joining Black and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. Let's work together to reduce HIV/AIDS in our community, and never forget, community is our superpower.
Hey family, it's Angela Robinson, and I'm joining Black and AHF to say, stigma gotta go. Let's work together to get rid of the stigma around HIV and AIDS in our community. Because community, that's our superpower.
Hi, I'm Keith Boykin, and I'm proud to join with the Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition, AHF, George M. Johnson, and iN-Hale Williams in saying stigma gotta go. Let's get rid of the HIV/AIDS stigma in our community because community is our superpower.
Hey, what's up? This is your man Nico Anand. And in addition to checking in on y'all during this quarantine, I wanted to let y'all know that I am joining BLACC and AHF in saying stigma gotta go. So let's work together to reduce the HIV and AIDS stigma that's in our community. Because hey, community is our superpower. Amen? Now turn to your neighbor, say, neighbor. Well, text or tweet them. All boys aren't blue. I'll see y'all later.
Hey there. So we had that was fun. And did you all cry?
It's very powerful.
I've seen this now a million times, through the edit and the editing process, and it still just conjures up so many emotions in me, just like the book did. And so I'm just so happy to talk to the two of you all because this is the core of how we got here. So we'll start with you, Amara. How did we get here?
So it actually was really interesting. And, it's the power of relationships, and it's the power of just thinking creatively about how you want to portray a message. So, transparently, obviously you and I had worked together through different AHF and Black projects. George has been an instrumental part of some of the work that Black has done, particularly focused on gay Black men. And when he talked about the book, he and I were having a conversation, and I said, what if we did kind of a recorded broadcast of your book for National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day? And he was like, I really love that idea. Let's talk more about it. So we talked more about it. And one thing I pride myself on is not knowing how to do things, but knowing the right people to call to make it happen. And then, of course, Nathan, it was a no-brainer to call you, and thank God you were free and available, thinking you were gonna have a little vacation, because you really were the right mastermind to collaborate with George to make the magic happen that we just experienced. So, it's the power of a simple idea, talking it through with people who have a trusting relationship with each other, And and here we are. So thank you both, first of all. Thank you, truly thank you both.
Thank you. And I just want to add to that, how divinely inspired it was. I had just finished reading the book, and you had no idea, Mara. And I was going to call George or figure out how I could get in touch with them. And I was like, I know somebody that knows them. And because I have to just say how much, so much of this book resonated with me. And then almost like clockwork, you both called me on and asked me to do this. And it was really, literally, I was exhausted. I had not, 2020 had worn me out, just like so many of us, but I could not say no. And I just have to say, George, what a brilliant person you are, what a brilliant writer you are. And then to have been able to work with you these last couple of months, you're also just a joy, which is like unheard of, the brilliant genius joy all in one. Tell us how you feel about your words coming to life in this form.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think I have a great imagination, but I think there are times where even my imagination, I guess at times has its limits. Like I knew what I saw for my words and I knew what I wanted to see for the book. But it was awesome to hear Amara's thoughts on this really, really cool project. And then to see your vision, Nathan, come to life really from, just what you imagined and who you imagined being part of it and people who I imagine being part of it. I think the really great thing about it is I come from community and I'm still very heavily involved in Black queer community. And so knowing that my book came out during a pandemic, knowing that our communities are the most affected when any type of health crisis happens, and knowing that many of the people in our community may not even be able to afford the book, afford an ebook or an audiobook, or have any access to it, for us to be able to create something with the book that can go to community that is free of cost, so that people can also learn from the story that I wrote and be healed by it, and also work through some of the things that they need to work through with using me as the vessel. I think that's the most amazing part about it, is how we've still found another way to create something magical for Black community, and to be able to give it to community free of charge with, during these times. I think that's the most beautiful thing about it, is finding ways to still get the message out there in the midst of chaos and in the midst of obstacles.
And Nathan, if I can just tap into something that you said and then what George says, it was divinely ordained. I mean, because it really wasn't, it was not like, it started off as like not even a structured conversation that George and I are having. We were talking about some other things, and then that came up, and then I was talking to a colleague, Lauren, about trying to figure this out. Because in my mind, honestly, I think about you as this filmmaker, this magical filmmaker. So it never thought to me of initially, like, would Nathan do this? But it just, in my spirit, it felt so right. And then you said yes, but even the process of how the actors were identified, it was like every step of the way, when we, all three of us, kind of got ourselves out of the way and let kind of the spirit guided, like it was guiding it. Every single step of the way, we see that it was all the right cast to be a part of it. You two as the creative elements to be a part of it. The magic of even the idea, because if y'all remember, we were all fixated on it was going to be filmed here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And, things started, and they were like, well, maybe it should be in New York, and then it just was kind of like it. So every step of the way, and George, I think it goes to your point, because the intention was to give back to community and to empower community and to uplift community, that I really do believe that all three of us confirm that we felt very divinely guided through the whole process. And so it's been just so magical. And I think that is why what we just experienced was so magical. I will tell you, honestly, when George and I are talking about it, I had no idea what this would look like. You know what I mean? And this is like beyond everything of the intertwining of these beautiful pictures of your life, George. And, I mean, it's so beautiful. It's so, I can't even say, I could watch it another million times, Nate.
Well, that's a testament to you, Amara, having the vision, and then also Black and AHF consistently supporting us in the community that are creators. I know that you've supported both George and I on other projects. And so what you all continue to do is just really beneficial. And I think it is connected. One of the things I have to say, talking about the pictures, the MVP for me is Nanny. That Nanny is the MVP. My favorite moment is the image of Nanny in the red, and she's sitting there because that she felt she was done, and I love that moment. Talk about why representation matters to you, George. Why you had to. You've quoted Toni. Is it Toni Morrison?
Yeah.
Several times. Talk about that and why you had to write the book.
Yeah, Toni Morrison's quote is if there's a book that you want to read and hasn't been written yet, then you must write it. And I just take that into everything that I do in life. I think representation and visibility, it's the starting point for us. I always say it's not like where we end. I think a lot of times society makes it our ending point to almost be like, look, you finally made it. And realistically, it's like, well, no, this is where our journey actually has to begin, because now that you can see one of us, it is literally just the representation of a million of us. And so we now have to do the work to allow everybody else to come in. And I think in Black storytelling, it takes a lot of care and a lot of patience. I think people are often, they often see Black characters as the villains. And we hear the stories of the trauma, but we don't hear the totality of the story. And so even in writing the book, I wanted to make sure that I was making the characters who are real people in my life total, and making them whole, and letting everybody else know that it's okay to, that we're not equal parts, but we're made up of the good parts and the bad parts. So we're not just the total sum of our bad parts, that we are the total sum of all of our parts. And, in regards to my grandmother, I just felt it was so important because we all have those quote leaders, as I like to say, the Baldwins, the Audre Lordes, Martin Luther Kings, who we pull quotes from on a macro level. But on a micro level, I think in each of our families, we always have that one person that we go to for the advice, that one person that gives us the message, that gives us the word. And for my family, it was my grandmother, Nanny. And it's always so interesting that red picture is everybody's favorite, because the hat she's wearing is the last one I bought her for Christmas. She got sick. So, that picture I think is just really, really special for all of us, because she specifically got that suit to go with the hat I got her. And you can tell she just knew that it was perfect. And she just looked so perfect in that picture. And I think that's, for me, the memory that I want everybody to take away is this woman from the South who just kind of gave her all, and we all have that person in our lives who, just does that for Black folks and community. And so, yeah, I just think she's representative of all of the big mamas and the nannies and the Medeas and all of the characters that we have seen, the iterations of Black grandmothers we have seen. She just embodied all of them. And, and I think that's why Jennifer was able to never have met my grandmother and nail her perfectly, because it just came through on the pages, and she just breathed life into it.
Amara, speaking of representation, why was it important to you? Because this is National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, right? So it's the entire Black community that's targeted or spoken to on this day. Why did you think this particular story was important to represent on this day?
Well, it's interesting, Nathan, because I think it really has so much to do with just conversations that George and I and you and I separately had around the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is, and I love it when you came up with the kind of the tagline, "Stigma gotta go," because we know, on so many levels, whether it's looking at gender identity, whether it's looking at racial identity, whether it's looking at socioeconomic class, what have you, across the board, stigma disproportionately impacts us on so many levels. And I'm not even talking, I just want to stay within the lens of the Black community, as George was talking about. I oftentimes say, I grew up around a lot of white folks in my journey. And I said, white folks don't really spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to separate out or disproportionalize the Black community. It's almost like there's a drop in there and we'll do it to ourselves. And so I felt like it was important that we needed to have, we can talk about HIV and AIDS, but if we don't talk about the impact of stigma within our community, then, it's almost like we're allowing community to be in a space of separation as opposed to the unity that is the heart of the word community. And knowing George's, I hadn't even read the book at that point, but just knowing who George was and the conversations that we had, it was almost like intuitively, I was like, we need to incorporate these two. And one, because I thought it was also really important in a different kind of a way, in a different space, for his voice to be heard. Because I mean, there's some really, and I think we saw in the chapters that were chosen, some real beauty in the consistent messaging around not being so caught up in terms of who you are and who we are, as opposed to whose we are, And I think, Nanny was kind of the epicenter of really the queen mother, if you will, of truly building community in a loving way and in a very unconditional way. So she reminds me of other folks in that role of like you can bring all of who you are to the table, and as long as this is all brought in the spirit of love, you're going to be given and embraced in the spirit of love. And that's the essence of the Black family. And we got to go back to that. And this book was just the perfect example to have that conversation around how some ways we've gotten far removed from the essence of love and humanity within the Black community.
I think that is spot on, and that's one of the things that you do so brilliantly in the book. And I might overuse that word today, George, because that's how I feel after being on this journey with you all for the last few months. Is you talk about, and I think that's why the text and the work resonated so much with me, is because you talk a great deal about the intersectionality of your Blackness and your Black queerness and the dilemma of reconciling those two. And then we talk about stigma. And I firmly believe that stigma stems from, HIV and AIDS being a gay man's disease when it was first introduced to the world. And in the Black community, we have yet to get rid of that, right? And so it prevents layers and layers and layers of things from us moving forward, where we see other communities and their infection rates going down, ours continue to go up because of that stigma, because we're not reconciling around Black queerness and the Black community. I want you to talk a little bit about that and how you have moved from that.
Yeah, I mean, and HIV is another part of my intersection because I'm HIV positive. And so being one of the most vocal, probably now at this point, Black people who is HIV positive with a platform my size that actually says that I am, that becomes another part of the story and another part of the journey, because this book, it was written by me, somebody who is living with HIV. And so it's interesting because the traumas in the book, people often ask me like, well, why didn't you really write about HIV in the book? I said, I didn't acquire HIV while between those ages. I said, but what's interesting is the things that I went through are set me up for the risk of it. And so in reading that, the vulnerability just kept growing as you get through the book, as I was learning consent and I was learning these things that had been almost taken from me because, Black queer people, we don't really get to live a full adolescence. And then we don't have the resources around sexuality, sexual identity. And so when we do finally start to come into our own, we are already being thrown into the vulnerable category of HIV and the epidemic. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, in order to get to this place now, it was truly recognizing all of the things that make me who I am, my Blackness, my queerness, the fact that I am HIV positive, but that none of those things, like I said, they don't reduce me. And, a lot of the work that I'm doing now is to reduce stigma, living boldly as the person that I am and allowing others to be able to see it. It starts to remove that veil that has continued to carry with, throughout, like you said, since it was identified as gay cancer, I believe was the first term that they used back in 81. And so to be 40 years now, 40 plus years into the epidemic, as you said, our community continues to suffer under the weight of just stigma. And so the main goal of the book was to show that when you come from a loving family, it doesn't necessarily negate that you'll go through stigma and trauma, but it does always give you a place to call home. And it always gives you a place to have that's community. And it builds strong characters like myself to be able to go out into the world to reduce the stigma and to fight back against the stigma and to change the narrative. And as you said, I think if we, like Amara was saying, if we can get back to the Black community as really the root of our safety and the root of what we call home, no matter how you identify gender-wise or sexuality, I think that is how we start to move past the epidemic, because that's really where the healing has to start. It has to start at the places where we're most broken. And, it really is the fact that our intersections other us. And, we are already othered by white society, and we are already othered by, anti-Blackness and just all of the things in the world, and anti-queerness. And so we can't do that to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's so well stated. And I agree with you 100%. Amara, in your work at AHF and leading Black, what have been your experiences when you go into the community, right? And in terms of Black people around HIV and AIDS and stigma, and then also Black queerness.
So it's been really interesting, and I think it's been one of the unique aspects of AHF is that we have a real commitment to not do things in the traditional way, as you both know, and so it's really about innovation. It's really about how do we create the opportunity to have conversations, and how do we create the opportunity to have awareness, but that is not about judgment of any population within the Black community, but really about how do we communicate with community. You know what I mean? And what's been interesting, and I've been a firm believer in this, because transparently, I didn't come out of a public health space. So I only joined AHF 5 years ago, but I've been Black for almost 50 years. And, so.
No, really?
Really.
I never would have known.
I know. I'll tell you a funny story later about for the one night that I was white, but for the rest of the time in my life, I've been a Black man. So, but all jokes aside, what's been interesting is that I have, from my perspective, felt like AIDS service organizations for most of this journey have only been having conversations around HIV and AIDS with the LGBTQ plus community. And if you go back a layer more, most of it really with the white LGBTQ plus community. So, kind of to George's point, we've almost voided a whole population that now, unfortunately, is disproportionately impacted by the epidemic. But I come from the space, Nathan, that nobody gets a pass. So I don't care what your gender identity is. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. If you show up and you identify as Black, then we need to have a conversation and engage as brothers and sisters, no matter, what other aspects of your identity you represent. But I think that's got to be the point of connecting, and to recognize that we really have to stay in a place of commitment of being my brother and my sister's keeper, no matter if, how your brother or sister may identify in other aspects of their identity. And I think if we can start there first, and that's really the lens of the work that we've tried to do, is say this work is about talking to community and creating safe spaces that, however you identify, that this is a safe space to come into community. And in a lot of the work that we do, we start with that. If you don't feel that this can be a safe space for you, then we're gonna ask you to leave right now, because it's gonna be a safe space for everybody to be present. And it's been interesting because even individuals that we, maybe would have stigmatized and stereotyped and said they don't want to be a part of it, they too macho or they too this, have really been ingrained in wanting to have a deeper understanding. Because at the end of the day, I firmly feel like at the end of the day, we all just want to be seen, we all just want to be recognized, and we all just want to be loved and valued.
You know, my best friend in my head. Well, I have two best friends in my head, Oprah and Beyonce. But Oprah says, you know, we all just want to know that we matter, right?
Yes.
I have to say, for just take a personal privilege, that how much I've learned in this process and how much I've grown. There's something, George, that you say that I never really processed before about diminishing who I am, right, to make other people comfortable. But Amara and I had an offline conversation about this, and it's not some, you know, we are a bit of a different generation than you are. And so your generation is opening our eyes to different things that we just processed as that's just how it is, you know? And you did enough just to trailblaze by saying, this is who I am, right? And you didn't really ask for much more. So if your family accepted you and your friends accepted you, you didn't really push for much more. And your generation is pushing, and I love it. And so I've learned a great deal, and I've grown a great deal from this. And I think that, and I hope that one of the things that people take away from this is that everybody's invited to the cookout. And the reason why everybody has to be invited to the cookout is because that is when we are the most powerful. Community is our superpower, right? That came up in a conversation Amara and I were having with someone else about this project. And I took it and ran and was like, that's a part of our campaign. You know, community is our superpower. But I truly believe that is the truth. We saw what happened in the election, right? We saw what happened when you harness Black people and you bring us together, and we really are collective, right? So why don't we do that for ourselves? Why don't we collectively heal ourselves? Why don't we collectively, you know, deal with economic empowerment? I could go on, but that's what I've gotten from this experience and from this film and from the book and from, you know, just our collaboration, is that we really are powerful together, and we need to be we need everybody at the cookout. Talk about what you expect and want people to take away from this, George.
Yeah, I guess what I want people to take away from this is for those who I guess haven't paid attention to the person to the left of them or the person to the right of them, to now maybe start to pay attention a little bit more to the person to the left of them or the person to the right of them. I think everybody just assumes that everybody walks this earth as cis, hetero people. And, you know, that's the first assumption when somebody walks in a room. You already start to say, oh, this person is Black, this person is a woman, and this person is, and you really don't know. And so I hope what people take away from it, which again, it starts at the title, you know, All Boys Aren't Blue. Like, I mean, it's literally from the beginning, before you even open up the book, it is a declaration to say, like, you know, you can't judge a book by its cover. I mean, as funny as that, as cliche as that is, but you really can't, because, you know, you may look at someone and see something, and because of how we are conditioned, you already make up in your mind that this person is this thing. And if you just take the moment to get to know the person, you may in turn get to know yourself. And so, yeah, I hope that's the takeaway, is that people start to get to know people who they assume are a thing, but in turn take time to process, am I actually this person, or am I the person that society told me to be?
You better preach, George.
I know. I'm telling you, enlighten every time you open your mouth. I love it. I love it. So brilliant. Amara, for Black and AHF, and then for you personally, because you obviously are invested in this personally. That's a dual question. What do you want in terms of your role at Black and AHF? And then also, what does Amara want people to take away from this moment?
So first of all, I want to say a testament to George. He has, this book has helped me grow. And, you know, and this journey has helped me grow, because I think part of it, answering your question, Nathan, is I think it gives us all the opportunity, because sometimes my mother always says, when you point a finger, there's 4 pointing back at you. I told her it's a lie, because it's really 3, because the thumb's not pointing at you, but I got, you know, what
and you got in trouble for that.
I did. But seriously, is that it's allowed an opportunity. And one of the things I would encourage people to do is to take a look in the mirror, because sometimes it's so easy to say, well, I'm doing this work, or we're doing this to heal or to address this challenge in other people, and not knowing that sometimes it's also for you. So it's really been, so one is I just hope that people, in the true spirit of love for self and love for community, will do the easy work of just looking in the mirror first and saying, what am I supposed to learn for me, as I then bring that message, meaning the greater I, bring that message to community. So that's one thing, because I think the first step of it is to look and to recognize our own self, and to recognize what is the intersectionality, what is the connection between us in this building community. So that's the piece. Then there's the business piece. And the business piece is recognizing and valuing and honoring what George said. But if you have the wherewithal, we as Black folks have got to support Black folks. So go get this book. It's at Target, you can get it at Amazon, but go get this book, because the experience that you've had through this virtual experience is just a small teaser of what I really think is the transformation of self through the journey, God bless you, through the journey of George being vulnerable and sharing his life. And we need to support that and uplift that in some tangible ways. And the third thing is to elevate us all to a greater commitment of really taking the journey of getting to know each person for who they are, not who is comfortable for who we want them to be, not who is comfortable for who society said, but who are they? And what is a part of their identity is important to them, and to embrace that and to love that, and to be open to share your own levels of identity that are important to you, and that will truly build community.
Amen. And we'll wrap up, but I will say that personally, I want people, one thing about the film, the creative part of it, the vision for it was that we are works of art, right? And so I wanted us to be surrounded by beautiful works of art from African-American artists, curated by an African-American art dealer, and just really illuminate our skin tones and really translate what we, because I think most people, when they heard a dramatic reading, they thought it was going to be one thing, and then they got what we just delivered. So I'm just very happy to be able to express the artistry in that way with the text. Then I also learned a lot. I thank you again, George, for understanding non-binary, understanding gender identity a lot more than I have. I'm 10 years older than you. I'm about to be 45. And so there's a lot of this that is new for me. And I have to applaud you for being also very gentle with me as I learned and as I had to correct myself. And it has really been an education for me around gender identity and what non-binary means and gender expression, and why that's so important that we respect that from people. When people say, this is who I am, and please address me as such, why that's important that we do that. So I learned that. And then the third thing is, I hope people had fun. I hope people enjoyed it, because it's a fun film. And the good news about it is it's not over. You've got if anybody's been sleeping under a rock, can you wrap up and tell us what's next for the project, and just, some wrap up?
Yeah. And so I always like to preface, because I do a lot of Zooms and just a lot of things now. So my pronouns changed in the midst of after the book came out. And so in the book, it is he, him. And we even had to put a disclaimer for the newer editions that come out. So in the book, it is he, him. I now go by they, them. And like I always tell everybody, this is for me personally, I identified as he, him for 34 years. And so I am still having to have grace with myself, with my own truth and my identity. So I extend that grace to others who are also still working through it with me. And so I just appreciate that that people are trying. That's all my goal is because it doesn't bother me as much, but I know it bothers the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old and the 18-year-old that is really, coming up behind me. And so I have to do the work to break it all down so that they have the pathway to walk through. But I'm gonna be good, But with the book, we're working on a TV show with being produced by Gabrielle Union and her production company, as well as Sony Television. We are currently, or we're about to go into the pitch phase, which is, taking it out to see who may want to acquire the project. We're really excited about it. It will focus on the college years. And it will, I think the beautiful thing about the story we're going to tell is it will, tell some of the things that weren't in the book, heavily reflect a lot of the things that were in the book, but also give the character of George the opportunity to potentially have conversations, make different choices if I could have went back in time to do some things. So I think it'll be great because it'll show the totality of what our experience was, as well as what the experience could be with certain things from community stepping up in a way to protect us. So, yeah.
That's great. Amara, what are your wrap-up thoughts? What's next for Black AHF? What's going on?
Well, we want to just encourage everybody to stay engaged with the work that we're doing through Black. So, of course, you can go to blacc.net and, connect with us and continue. There's lots of great projects that are coming down the pipeline, not just around HIV and AIDS, but just around uplifting community. And trying to creatively think how the three of us get to work together again and some more stuff. So, we got to get George now before he gets to Hollywood.
I know, because once we get them, it's all over. It's going to be Prince Carlton and all of that.
Now, Nathan, I also I want to throw the question to you because you've got some great things happening too. So, tell us about what's going on with Nathan-Hale Williams and iN-Hale.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to both of you for your partnership, for your vision, for your work, for your friendship. Amara and I had already had a friendship, and George, I hope you count me as I count you as a new friend. I just adore you both, and I'm just so grateful for this opportunity. It's been one of the highlights in my recent career, and so I want to thank you both for that. Also want to thank GLAAD for giving us this After Talk platform, and Sean Usher and Rich Ferrara over at GLAAD for just being a great partner to this whole endeavor and then giving us this platform. And of course, thank you to Black and AHF for continued support. Well, I have another project with AHF debuting later this month. It's a documentary on the homeless crisis called It Can Be Done, Ending Homelessness in America, that premieres at the Pan-African Film Festival, which is the world's largest African-American film festival. And we're excited about that. So we got much work to do. A pilot I just finished based on my novel, Ladies Who Lunch and Love, is being shopped around. And then I am writing, to Amara's delight, a feature-length film based on a film that AHF and Black sponsored called 90 Days, dealing with HIV and AIDS in the Black heterosexual community. So there's a lot going on, and you can catch me at www.iN-Hale.com. I would be remiss if I didn't thank my wonderful business partner, Richard E. Pelzer II, also known as Uncle Richard, Lauren Hogan, who has been our partner in this the whole time. And I'll give everyone a chance to talk about your social media handles. Mine are Nathan H. Williams on Instagram, Twitter, and then hit to you, George.
Oh, mine are at I am GM Johnson on Twitter and on Instagram, and George Matthew Johnson on Facebook, because as I always say, there are still people who don't know that my first name is George. So I always have to put Matthew for the people still on Facebook.
Great.
Black is BLACC_AHF on Instagram, and then BLACC.AHF on Facebook, or the Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition, and you can Google that on Facebook and say there. And Nathan, I would also be remiss. I want to give just a special shout out and appreciation to our CEO, Michael Weinstein, who really is so supportive of the creative projects that have been able to come out of Black and AHF, and also one of our vice presidents, Anita Castile, both are who, are Nathan's secondary to me biggest fan in terms of his creative work, and really have been so inspired and enlightened by the work that George is doing. And I thank you both. George, thank you again for trusting Black and AHF to do this project with your work. And Nathan, thank you for being open to, in a crazy time in your life, to pause and bring your creative genius to bring this to life. And to all of the community partners that you both really helped to bring together to be a part of this project, including GLAAD and so many others. This really could not be done without the family coming together. So we thank you.
Amen. Well, on that note, we are going to sign off. Now, if your family and friends did not catch it, the replay will be available throughout the month of February. Go to blacc.net for all the replaying information, or iN-Hale Mega V. So youtube.com/iN-Hale Mega VEE and catch a replay of the film. Thank you all so much. Have a good night. Community is our superpower, because stigma gotta go. Bye, y'all.
Bye.